Are you going to talk about the relief valve in the oil pump and the bypass valve in the oil filter?
Yes, I am. They're the components that I was referring to that can change the flow of oil. Let's start with the oil pump. We'll look first at the conventional oil pump, typically driven by a shaft off a gear on the camshaft. There are two basic design differences in the conventional oil pumps, and they have to do with the pumping elements. The first is the gear type design. In this oil pump, there are two spur gears, a drive gear and a driven gear, mounted in a close-fitting housing. When pumping, oil is carried around the outside of each gear in the space between the gear teeth and the case. As the teeth mesh in the center, oil is forced out, producing oil pressure. The rotor-type oil pump is essentially a special lobe-shaped gear meshing with the inside of a lobed rotor. The center lobed section is driven, and the outer section idles. As the pump rotates, it carries oil around between the lobes. As the lobes mesh, they force oil out under pressure in the same manner as the gear-type pump. You'll find that most of the oil pumps used in Ford engines have rotors rather than gears. The other type of oil pump that is used by Ford is driven by the crankshaft. This pump mounts directly to the front of the engine. It functions in the same manner as the conventional rotor pump that we just discussed. The inner rotor is driven, this time by the crankshaft, and the outer rotor idles. Oil is forced out as the lobes come in contact. The primary advantage of using this style of oil pump is that it's a space saver because it is integral with the engine. Plus, there are fewer parts than the conventional style oil pump. Now, the way that the oil pump can affect oil flow is through the relief valve. This valve relieves excess pressure produced by the oil pump. This excess oil pressure is bled off and goes back into the oil pan. The point where the relief valve is activated varies between engines, but usually it's around 55 to 70 psi. It's necessary to limit the total amount of pressure because damage could occur to the oil filter or to seals if the pressure is excessive. Now, I'd like to note, too, that oil pumps are designed to produce more pressure than is typically needed by the engine. The reason for this is to assure that the oil pump has sufficient capacity during extreme situations. Now, let's take a look at the oil filter and the bypass valve. The oil filter should allow all the oil in the system to flow through it. But there are some situations that could occur, especially when the engine is cold, where it is necessary to bypass the filter to assure an adequate oil supply is available to the engine. When the pressure rises past a certain preset point, the bypass valve opens and allows oil flow to go directly to the bearings without filtering.
How about if the filter is dirty and plugged? Will the bypass valve work then?
Oh, yeah, definitely. In fact, I was just going to mention that. Failure to change the filter at the recommended intervals can result in a totally plugged filter, allowing dirty oil to be circulated through the engine. Let's take a look at the results of bypass valve operation one more time. Here's normal flow with oil going through the filter. Now here's the flow when the filter is plugged. Notice how the filter is completely bypassed.
Does the bypass valve vary in its opening and closing, or is it simply open or closed?
It'll vary in its degree of opening, depending on the amount of filter clogging. It won't typically be just opened or closed. Remember, the bypass valve doesn't just work because the filter is plugged with contaminants. Because there are times, like when the oil is cold and thick, when it's necessary to bypass the filter to assure adequate flow to the engine.
I can understand why this valve would be very useful in the winter because the oil is thicker when it's cold than when it's warm.
That's right.